As we get into today, we are going to move a little deeper into this framework that we've been looking at over the last, I think it's closing in on the last month, as we go through this. And we've been looking at how we can carry offenses that will require us to forgive. Okay? We're going to encounter these offenses that, and this is my cheat sheet over here, just in case you're wondering. Don't try to see it. You won't be able to read my writing anyway. But what I did is this is a ruthlessly stolen framework that I took from Transformation Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I thought it was a very helpful framework because it helps you. I believe it helps you, and I say that because I believe it helps me look at some of the things that have happened in life and to follow the right pathway through them. So we have noted that not all offenses are created equal. Some offenses hit us a little bit harder than others. So, the first thing we looked at is like you sort of have your small, medium, and large type of offenses, and where do they happen, and what's the impact that they had. I will tell you that after our lesson last week, I went home and I thought about it. And so for those of you that have your worksheet and you've had it for a while, I'm going to ask you to consider making an edit to it. So you will see as you go down the side, we have these different categories. We have the fault, the offense, the feeling, the response, the antidote, the answer, and the reaction. Now, from my vantage point, and perhaps you've heard me say this before, words have meanings, right? And I want you to know that I believe that there is a world of difference between reacting and responding. Okay, there's a world of difference between reacting and responding. Whereas reacting is something that's sort of automatic. And I would also go so far as to say reacting is something that can pretty much be animalistic, right? You poke the dog and the dog snaps at you. You try to steal the dog's chew toy and it'll growl at you, right? There's different things like that. A response is a more thoughtful thing to do, right? And it takes a little bit of time. And so the more I looked at this framework, this is me going into making this change. I'm going to ask that you consider swapping these two. All right. I'm going to ask that you consider saying the reaction here, and then what's the healthy response? Right? What do we want to thoughtfully and intentionally do? That's what I want you to at least consider. Now, you don't have to change this if the framework's worked for you. That's great, but this is where we are today. Now, just to do a quick run through, we talked about there's some little offenses that we pick up, right? Somebody waves and you wave to somebody, they ignore you, you can be offended. Like there's these different things. And we talked about how these small offenses, we're going to call those frustrations. And they generally happen at an exchange. There's a point, there's an intersection that happens where these things occur. And when they occur, you can feel slighted, right? You can feel like somebody doesn't value you. And as a response, the reaction is to be like, well, I'm going to get even with them. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do whatever. Right? And the more I thought about it, this is where the reaction made more sense. The reaction can be to be petty towards someone else, right? Now, we can find that, but we know what we really need to do is we really need to be mature, and we need to develop patience, and we need to get over it, right? Like that's where we can find ourselves. Now, sometimes we have bigger issues that we have to deal with, right? There's times where we deal with failure. We deal with scenarios where you have an expectation that is not met. Anybody have ever been there? Anybody ever who's ever had an expectation? All right, we've all had an expectation. Have you ever had anybody not reach that expectation? We've all been there too. We've been there probably on both sides of that equation, right? And so what happens there? There's times when that happens where you can feel like the victim. Have you ever felt that way? I think the last time I told you that I'm a firm believer that people tell stories on themselves one of two ways. They tell the story to make themselves look like the hero, or they tell the story to make them look like the victim. I was taken advantage of, right? This is where it was. And the result is that you experience pain. It hurts whenever that expectation was missed. I think I used the example last week of buying Jess all sorts of Thomas Train stuff for Christmas, and the first thing that he opens up, he's like, "Thomas, this is for babies." And Trace and I were like, "Oh my goodness, we're in the soup now," right? Like that was our reaction. That was the immediate place that we went to at that point. Now, when people do this to you, like when stuff like that happens, what you need, the antidote, what you need is ministry. And ministry happens by being around people. It's not just ministers, but there's other people. It's having people in your tribe that can keep pointing you towards God, keep pointing you towards Christ, that can have you rely on the Holy Spirit. That's what you need. You need to have a scenario like that. You need ministry. But as we talked last week, it's a process. It's a process. It's not something that's done instantaneously. You just don't get over it. It takes time and repetition, time and repetition, time and repetition to get through that. And the end result is that oftentimes you need to set boundaries. That may mean you need to adjust your expectations, right? You need to have these things so that you don't get hurt anymore. Like, if you want to create a situation where you allow somebody to keep hurting you and hurting you and hurting you, that's probably not a really good idea. So that was here. Today, we're going to talk about the big ones. This is going to be a hard one. I think I tried to set that expectation for you last week, but this is going to be this is going to be an uncomfortable lesson. And with this, we're going to talk about flagrant fouls. This is where people do things to you that cause massive hurt. Now, I'm not going to ask you about this personally, but I am going to ask if you can think of anybody that you may know that has ever been hurt massively. Right? I think we probably all do. We probably all know somebody who has done that. And what happens is, where this offense happens is when someone is exploited. Exploit, I think that's spelled correctly. It's exploited, right? The Bible has all sorts of examples of people who lived in this space. I made a quick note. Joseph was exploited, right? His brothers decided that they didn't like him, so they threw him in a pit and sold him into slavery. There was a lot of intention behind causing that harm, right? That's where we are. I thought of Moses. And this will make more sense as we get a couple more lines filled in here. You're going to say, you're going to see with, I think, a little more clarity as we go through this. But I think Moses is somebody else who dealt with that, right? Moses grows up in the royal court in Egypt, and he sees a Hebrew being abused by the slave master. He kills the slave master. And then what does he do? he runs away because he is fearful of being killed himself. And he spends the next 40 years sitting in the wilderness watching sheep. He goes from a royal life to this other type of life. I thought of this morning as I was praying about this lesson, um, Gideon came to mind. I don't know how often you read the story of Gideon, but you'll find that in the story of Gideon, Gideon doesn't have a very high opinion of himself. When he's saying, man, he was what was he doing? Trying to make wine on the threshing floor of the grain house, whatever the story is, and the angel of the Lord comes to him, and Gideon's like, "What are you coming to me for? Like, I'm the least of the least house in the whole village here, right?" He doesn't have a very high opinion of himself. Um, I'll just give an aside here. We uh, we live in a really interesting time, and if you, you probably can't see it, but Pastor John has a cup up here that has "The Chosen" written on it. Has anybody ever watched The Chosen? Oh, most of you have, right? Um, we live in a time when there's like high production value on a lot of these things that can give you a perspective, and can give you some context for what some of those scenarios may be like. So The Chosen is one. Something that we have watched of late is something called The House of David on Amazon. Now, there's a lot of liberties that are taken with that. I'll also tell you this. There's a story of Moses on Netflix. If you haven't watched that, I would encourage you to consider watching that. It's a really neat presentation, and it's a high quality presentation of that. But if you watch House of David, you get the opinion that David really wasn't very highly thought of by his brothers or even by his dad. Now, that's not necessarily biblical in nature, but you see at the story of David and Goliath, when David shows up at the battlefield, his brothers are like, "What are you doing here? Go away." Right? You can see how they value him. Um, so I thought, well, who are some people who were perhaps flagrant fouled? I think Joseph would be one, Moses would be one, Gideon perhaps, David. I also wrote you and me. I'll hazard a guess that each of us have endured a flagrant foul or two in our lives. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. I share this. This is a verse that I'm sure you've heard before. I want you to be encouraged today as we go through this. All right. It's heavy stuff, but I want you to be encouraged. If you have gone through, if somebody has done something absolutely horrible to you, I want to remind you of who is in control of things. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. Joseph says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Now, I'm going to tell you, Joseph won't be able to say this if he sat in that flagrant foul. Because if you sit in this flagrant foul the wrong way, and you'll see this by the time that we're all done, it'd be real easy to have this thing go a completely different direction. But we can tell that Joseph has forgiven his brothers. And as such, he has this perspective. And this is why forgiveness is so important. And truthfully, I don't think we give forgiveness enough play. But we need to be able to forgive people to be able to unlock and unleash God's power through us towards others. Genesis 50, 20. Now, when somebody flagrantly fouls you, there is a feeling that is produced. And that feeling that is produced is that you feel violated. I will hazard the guess that we have people in this room that have felt violated. I won't ask you to raise your hand, but I'll just ask you to sit there for a moment. This is I have a couple of, I have a couple of things here. Um, Many of you know my parents have a coin shop over town. Some of you may not know is that it was robbed whenever I was in college. Now, mom and dad started that store to be able to put my brother and I through college. That was the idea behind it. And the day before I was supposed to go in for my pharmacy school interview, my mom called me late at night and said, "Hey, you need to know something." And I said, "What's going on?" She said, "Somebody broke in and stole everything we had." Um, and I will tell you, I'm not a real social person. So whenever I went to college, I refused to have a roommate. I had a private room because I don't play well with others, as most of you can. You get it, right? You can. It doesn't take too much of a stretch to get that from me, right? But I'll tell you, that was a very lonely night. That was that was a rough, sleepless night because of the violation that you felt. Somebody came in and took everything. I had classmates who did very, very poorly on exams and they felt violated and they quit their major. They decided this must not be what I'm supposed to do. They gave up. They changed dramatically. A couple of weeks ago, I watched a father and a young son. Uh, I'm going to guess the kid was less than seven. I would guess that the kid was less than 7 years old. And I watched the father berate this kid's um, conduct in such a massive way. I was like, wow, that was way overkill for this situation. Have any of you ever done that? Have you ever said something and you sort of stepped into a bear trap? I I mean, I watched that happen and I thought, oh my goodness, I hope this doesn't happen regularly, and I certainly hope this kid doesn't take this the wrong way. I know some people who feel violated when family members don't wish them a happy birthday in a timely way. I was thinking about that this morning, so I had to wish Jess a happy birthday. Everybody wish Jess a happy birthday before you leave today. Don't interrupt class for that. Too somber of a teaching today. But yeah, think of that when it's your birthday and somebody that you've been very close to or you think very highly of, and they forget. You feel violated, feel taken advantage of, right? There's some of us were picked on for various reasons. I was picked on because and you can tell me if I'm going to close my eyes. I don't want to see you all nod in confirmation of this. I was picked on mercilessly for my big ears whenever I was a kid, right? And you can, if you're done nodding now, I'll open my eyes back up. But still self-conscious about that, right? But sometimes it's that you're real tall, that you're real short, that you're heavy, that you're skinny. Like kids can be pretty ruthless. The playground of life is anything but fair. And there's times where you can feel exploited, you can feel violated. There's a story in scripture, 2 Samuel chapter 13 verse 20. 2 Samuel 13:20. This this is a story that doesn't get a whole lot of conversation. Um, but it reads, her brother Absalom, this would be Tamar's brother, Absalom, said to her, "Has that Ammon, your brother, been with you? Be quiet for now, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." And Tamar lived in her brother Absalom's house, a desolate woman. Now, this isn't one of those warm and fuzzy Bible stories, but this is in David's own house. He had a son that raped his daughter. And another son comes and says, "Well, wait a second, just don't take it to heart. Keep it over here." But it says that she lived in her brother's house, a desolate woman. That's a flagrant foul. That's a flagrant foul. I think about something that I heard, somebody who really helped me on my way many, many years ago is a guy by the name of David Barton. And what he did is he opened my eyes to a lot of the historical perspectives and the faith of the founding fathers, which is one of my just favorite periods of history. Now, he made this statement to me one day. He said, we have so many challenges in our country today because the church has not been the church. And I thought, that's a little too true. I wrote a note on my outline here that reads unwed mothers. And some of you may know situations like this, where there is something that happens. There was perhaps an exploitation that happened, a violation that happened, and instead of finding a warm and welcoming and a place to help somebody, there's people that say, "I got to run away," and maybe that rings true to some. When these scenarios happen, there is a reaction that can occur. And the reaction that can occur is programming. Do I have any computer people in the room? Craig, you're a computer guy, aren't you? Any others? All right. Craig, keep me honest as I try to do this, right? But a computer only produces what it's programmed to do. Right? So there's some computers that are very, very simple and basic, and we call them calculators, and we carry them around in our pocket, and you can put things in, and it can do that stuff. It cannot spell check. It cannot grammar check. It cannot make sure that you don't say flagrant foul instead of fragrant foul, or whatever it is that I screwed up. Right? There's certain things, there's certain limitations that come in. But I'm going to tell you, when you experience a flagrant foul, when somebody exploits you, takes advantage of you, violates you, what can happen in that moment is you can change the way you think about yourself. You can believe harmful things. You can believe distorted things. We can believe things about ourselves that are contrary to God's will and contrary to God's design. Living in this world is a challenging and dangerous place because we are always being exposed to new programming. We are always being exposed to programming that isn't necessarily designed to help us. Will any of you turn the television on this afternoon to watch a football game? If the three of you are going to watch football today, four of you are going to watch football now. We need to have a lesson on honesty. That's what we need to have. We're going to make that a new core value, right? But if you watch a game, what's going to happen is you're going to take a timeout. When they go to timeout, what comes on your TV screen? A commercial. What's the commercial? It says, oh, you don't have these things. Your life would be so much better if you had whatever. If you had a new car, if you had this to eat, if you had this disease, they advertise all sorts of things today, right? Let's have a little bit of levity here. But the reality is that some of the time you see this stuff, and I was telling somebody about this recently, about how whenever I was a kid, my mom would take us grocery shopping on Saturday morning. I was wanting to watch Bugs Bunny. I could not watch Bugs Bunny. We had to go to the grocery store. But fortunately, if I'd watched a little bit of TV beforehand, I knew the right cereal to beg for in the cereal aisle. I was programmed that if I would get Cocoa Puffs or whatever, there was whatever toy that was buried in the bottom of the bag, right? I was programmed. Now, that's an absurd example, but I want you to understand that this programming can happen, and this programming can be very, very detrimental. Romans 12:2. We've used this verse a number of times, but I want you to, if you haven't underlined it yet, you got to underline it now. You got to have this verse underlined in your Bible. Paul writes to the church in Rome, do not conform to the pattern of this world. Do not conform to the programming of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. Now, we got a lot more to go in talking about forgiveness. I'll just set the expectation here for you, because chances are we were all programmed even at home. You see, flagrant fouls, they may come from somebody on the out. They may come from somebody that you don't know that does something mean to you. That is possible. It is also possible that the flagrant foul can come from a friend of yours. And this is where, and this hurts. It can come from your family too. Flagrant fouls can come from anywhere. So what do you need? For those of us that have received a flagrant foul, what you need is a miracle. What you need is a miracle. Now, I think we've talked about this before. To be a candidate To receive a miracle, the only thing you need to have is a problem. The encouraging news today is I see a bunch of miracle candidates, right? This is where we are. Psalm 107, verses 19 and 20. Psalmist writes, "Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He sent out his word and healed them. He rescued them from the grave." There's a story recorded in John chapter 4, Jesus and the woman at the well. I want you to think about this woman at the well. You know, the story tells us, we're not going to read the story. I'm going to ask you to use your memory on this. But the story tells us that Jesus had to go to this well, and he's there at midday. And there's this woman that shows up there because she couldn't go any other time. She couldn't go when everybody else would normally go. You want to know why? Because she had been exploited, she had been violated, and she had programming that she should not be there. What did that woman need? She needed a miracle. And it so happened that one day she showed up at the well, and who was there? Jesus. A woman in need of a miracle shows up at the well, and she meets Jesus. The answer that we need for flagrant fouls is to be in his presence. I probably didn't spell that right. You need to be in the presence of God. The woman at the well meets Jesus. She's in his presence. He offers her a miracle. He says, "I have living water." Jesus offered her a miracle. And I don't know how much you need to hear it in this room, but you may need to carry this message somewhere else. That miracle is offered to each of us today. It's offered to the people that you know. But I want you to know this as well. Just like the answer to the fail is a process, being in God's presence is a process. Those of you who have been longtime believers, are you the same person now that you were years ago? You've changed. You've matured. You've developed, right? Psalm 16:11. The psalmist writes, "You make known to me the path of life. You fill me with joy." And if you're an underliner, the next three words, "in your presence." With eternal pleasures at your right hand. You make known to me the path of life. A path is a process. It's not the snap of your fingers. When I'm with you, you fill me with joy in your presence, with eternal pleasures at your right hand. If you have been flagrantly fouled, I will remind you, it will take time to get over this. It will take time to get through this. And ultimately, what this does is it brings us to, what is our response? And we have three responses here. We have three responses that we can be at this point. The first response is that we may need a breakup. Right? If you have been flagrantly fouled by somebody, that may be it. It may be done. Breakup. Over. That can sound pretty harsh. 2 Corinthians 6:17. Therefore, come out of them and be separate, says the Lord. Touch no unclean thing, and I will receive you. Sometimes you got to get away. You got to break up. Sometimes it's a breakthrough. Isaiah 58:8 reads, then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it can happen quickly. That's a breakthrough. I'm not going to tell you that God can't work real quick, because he can. Because he can. But some of us find ourselves in a place where we have received a flagrant foul and we stay the course. And we just keep going. And we just keep going. And we just keep going. And in this case, you will have a breakdown. You can go through these things, you can skip over. And with enough time, you will find yourself in a place of breakdown. Proverbs 16:18 reads, pride goes before destruction. See, this framework is so helpful, and this is why I wanted to share it with you, because we have all endured some levels of offenses throughout our lives. If there's anybody that has never been offended in this room, I'm sorry to have wasted the last 2+ months. We've all endured offense. But when we don't process it the right way, when we have a flagrant foul that comes our way and we're just trying to forget about it. Just try to forget, and we don't process it the right way, we put ourselves on a path to break down. When someone flagrantly fouls you, something must break. The relationship will break, the limitation will break, or you will break. Now, if you go back when I first started this, I think 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it was, there was a week off, and this is the third lesson that I've done on this format. But I tried to call out that sometimes there's a difference between intent and impact. Right? You know, like the kids that made fun of my big ears in grade school, I don't know how malicious it was, but it had a big impact. You know, there's times that you could say something to someone that hits a lot harder than what you expected. Sometimes you know that right away. I remember sitting down with someone on my team, and I'm also Gen X, which means that I'm supposed to be tough about a lot of these things. But I made the comment about how this person was very inconsistent, and I could just tell by the body language that being called inconsistent hurt very, very deeply. And it wasn't my intent to hurt very deeply. It was my intent to sort of state my observation. There was not like a lot of judgment with that. But we need to understand that there's a difference between how something is presented to us and how something is received. There can be a difference with the intent in which something is offered and the impact in which it could have. I could do my best to tell what I thought was a funny joke. Some of you would laugh, but it's also possible that some of you would experience frustration. Some of you could experience failure, and some of you could experience a flagrant foul. It's possible. Now, I'd like to think I'm funnier than that, but this is where you laugh, and you see, obviously, that didn't work. All right. So, I want you to understand that where you are has nothing to do, if you are enduring offense, it's about the impact that that offense had on you, not the intent in which that person offered. The grace that you offer and the compassion that you offer the person who extended that or whoever presented that to you, that's perhaps another angle for that. But I want you to understand that forgiveness requires that we understand the offender through grace and that we understand ourselves through the truth of a framework perhaps like this. So, what do we do? It's taken a month to get to this point. Um, you need to name a person or a situation that somebody who offended you or some situation that offended you. And I want to encourage you to look at it through these things. And you may need to look at it through a couple of these different things. You may not say, well, I had an expectation. You may have to look at this through a different filter. You may have to say, well, my reaction was that I wanted to be real petty. It's like, I'll get even with them, right? Or you may realize that what happened really impacted the way that you thought about yourself. I think these, at least from my perspective, these are the words that kind of stick out to me. You may say exploitation, whatever, but from my point of view, I'm suspicious that if you can look and you could say, you know what, this person doesn't value my opinion. Whenever I say something, it's just like I'm immediately dismissed. And so I fall down this category, right? Or every time I'm around somebody, or every time this what happens, it hurts. There's a painful thing. I feel victimized. They're taking, that this is what's going on. When we identify that feeling that's produced, we look at how we react to those things. I think that helps us figure out where we need to go. You see, when we have a scenario like this where you've been victimized and it hurts, it's not something where you're going to be over it just like that. You're just not going to mature out of it, right? You need to have this have this, and this is where I felt that this framework was so helpful. The last note that I have written is that we often need a bigger frame. We often need a bigger frame. We talked in week one about of frameworks to help focus your attention on something, right? I started off with, hey, it's Christmas time, and people think that I care about having a picture of their family. As an aside, generally I don't, right? Sometimes people wrap up pictures and they give them to me in a frame. right? Trace displays the pictures. Every once in a while, I'll put the picture face down. I just like, that's a joke. Well, it's not, I do put the pictures face down, but, like, that's where it is. Um, when we go through offenses in life, oftentimes we can just get stuck. We can just frame, oh, it hurts. And you get hyper focused on it's I'm the victim, or I'm unvalued, or I was violated, or like you can find yourself stuck. What you need a bigger frame. You need to expand that frame to be able to get the whole picture of how to process through that for forgiveness. I don't feel like that was well understood. Does that make sense to anybody? Have you, can you identify with maybe being stuck on one of these different points? Having a bigger frame can help unlock forgiveness. Now, we had a friend in here a couple of weeks ago, and he said, Jess, you've been teaching on forgiveness for 6 or 7 weeks now. How you feel it's going? And I think my response was, well, I think I'm a little worse off today than I was when I started. I may still feel that way today. I may still feel like, what this has done by going through a process of framing this. I realize there's probably a lot more people in my life that I need to forgive. There's a lot more situations in my life where I find myself where I might be stuck at some of these various points. And you may find yourself in that place as well. And I share that with you with the intent of encouragement, so that you don't say, well, I'm by myself. I'm whatever. Like, this is where we're all on this. We're probably all on this chart somewhere. We're probably all on this chart in multiple places with multiple people. That's my suspicion. Or maybe that's my story. Maybe that's your story too. But we're going to keep plugging away. With that, let me just take a look here. I haven't done this enough of late, but I want to make sure that I do this today. At one point, I was really good at writing the letters ACT on the board at the end of the lesson. I want to make sure that I do this after this lesson. But based on what you have learned, what action will you take? I am suspicious that now, at the end of this, we can identify actions that we can take. What change will you make? And is there something that you learned today that you can share with somebody else? Is there something that you can teach to somebody else for your benefit and for theirs? And with that,